We have a guest on the show today, and anybody who listens to the show regularly knows that we've had like one guest on the show because, for the most part, I think people listen because they want to hear Allison Rosen, and then like five people want to hear me. But, and Allison and I did say that if we had a guest that was absolutely positively perfect for the show, then we would bring them on. And here is that rare unicorn we have here. We have Tracy Kaplan, who's the executive producer and creator of the 10 News, which it comes out Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, and it's a rare thing. It's a news podcast that parents and kids can listen to together. So, hello, Tracy.
Hello. That is quite an intro. I feel like the bar is set really high now for this conversation.
I was thinking, as Tod was introducing you, I was thinking that is simultaneously a wonderful introduction and also a cruel introduction because, wow, he is setting you up.
I'm going to try to rise to the occasion here.
Okay, well, we were talking a while back, a couple weeks ago, and you made the point to me that pretty much all parents, should be exposing their kids to the news. And please explain why. Allison has two young boys, and I have a young boy. Why should we start, putting them in front of the Fox News? Why? When should we start showing them the news?
Because when you say the news, we think Fox, naturally.
Right. So I would say not Fox News. Okay. I'm a big fan of facts and and finding the right news that really helps break down what's going on. I think the key point is that they're getting it everywhere. So even if you think that your kids aren't being exposed to it, think about when they have your phone and a Apple News alert pops up, or because of my job, I have so many notifications that pop up between New York Times, the Washington Post. It's insane. But they're seeing that when they're on their own iPads, and even when they're at school, they're hearing other things from their friends. So you may have made choices for your household, but it's really worth a conversation with your kids to understand, like, what are they hearing? Where are they getting the news? And then really thinking about, okay, what do I need to be prepared in my family to then answer the questions that are coming up? So I say it's important to do it early because they are getting it. And with the 10 News, our goal is to really help further those conversations and give the context behind the headlines.
So what's the conversation like when you're talking with your host, Bethany, and your writer, was it Ryan?
Ryan.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Ryan Willard.
Ryan.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, when you guys are saying, okay, we've got to talk about Ukraine, and you guys have been covering it, what's the conversation like that you figure out the best way to do it that a kid will get it?
We really start with what I just said. So what are the headlines? How scary are they for us adults? I think they're also pretty scary. And then I think about, what do we know? So for kids, it's really helping them understand the words that are being thrown around. So economic sanctions, what does that mean? Why aren't we just going in with all of the NATO and US forces? What does NATO mean? So really kind of coming at it from that point of, how can we empower kids so at least as they're hearing things, even hearing their parents talk about it, that they understand what the terms are that are being thrown about. So that's really where we come at it from, is like, what are the things that we can control? Obviously, we can't control what's happening around the world. I wish I could. We can't control what kids are hearing and getting these little snippets, as I said. So the one thing that we can do is we can give kids that sense of control of at least understanding the terms, the words, and knowing that they're now empowered to ask their grown-ups what different things mean. A really interesting question that I had was, at some point, things changed from being Kiev to Kyiv. And there's actually a really wonderful reasoning behind it. It's the Russian version versus the Ukrainian version. And so putting that out there, that now empowers a kid that they know what to call it, they know why to call it that, and it helps them feel a little bit like they can do something.
It's kind of like we used to call it the Ukraine,
Right.
and now we just call it Ukraine. Do you know why?
So it's really because it's the region and the people. So basically, rather than saying, the as this like separate thing, you're talking about the people in the region in Ukraine.
Recently, you talked about Florida's quote "Don't Say Gay" bill on the show, and obviously, I think it's really interesting that you tackled that because it's I think tough in many ways because it's something that people are actually trying to ban kids from hearing about this, and you're discussing the thing that they're trying to keep out of kids' ears. Um, Again, what was the conversation like about approaching that sensitive topic? And then B, what was the worst email you got for doing it?
Actually, and maybe this is going to open the floodgates. We've only gotten positive responses. And I think that says something about this generation of kids and their approach with each other and in kind of the overall sexuality and gender space. I have a 10 and 12-year-old who school me all the time on the correct pronouns to use for their friends, and it's wonderful. I welcome it. And it was with any of these, it's a really tough discussion of what are we talking about? How are we approaching it? But this one actually I felt like was pretty easy for us because we know what our audience feels already about just normalizing differences. And that's actually one of the key tenets of our show is normalizing differences and celebrating them. So we'll never say that we all have to be alike. We love and embrace our tenors, as we call them, as all being individuals, but we're all wonderful people at our cores. And so really highlighting that it doesn't matter if you're gay, you're straight, you're non-binary, you are all wonderful children that deserve to learn and be talked about. So this one was pretty easy of just like, we have to do something because we're always thinking about that kid who can't be themselves in their school. And so at least having a podcast that they can tune into and listen to and know that they're hearing from other kids who are like them. We had this amazing transgender activist, Stella Keating, on the show, and she was the first teenager to testify in front of Congress for the Equality Act. And we did that for the end of Women's History Month. So if that gives you a sense of our approach to these things. But it's really, again, like kids hearing the news, kids this age, their approach and how they feel about gender and sexuality is changing. And we want to be the place that makes them feel like they have a home and don't need to be afraid of who they are.
I have a question. Are there any news stories that you have considered covering on the show that then you decide, you know what, this one is just too dark or too scary for kids? My boys are 5 and 3, and I think that I err on the side of wanting to protect them from things that might be too disturbing, too scary for them. And then, like you were saying earlier, then I find out, well, they're already hearing about it. They're already learning. And then I sort of kick myself because I think, well, I don't know in what fashion they learn. I mean, just to give an example, this is not a news story, but with my 5-year-old Elliot, I hadn't discussed with him where meat comes from. And I was like, at some point he's going to put together that a chicken nugget is the same as a chicken animal. But we hadn't had that conversation because I just didn't know how to have the conversation. I didn't want to make him sad. And then we were at dinner one night and a basket of rolls arrived. And he said, was this an animal? What kind of animal was this? And I realized, oh, he knows about this. And how did he learn about this? And maybe I should have had that conversation because then I could have had some control over it. So this is a very long-winded question. But yes, my question is, are there some news stories that you decide not to do?
Yes. And we have pretty rigorous debates about different topics and have just a wonderful team of educators, people who have worked in the kids media space for a while, journalists. So really all of us, and parents. So really all of us come with our perspectives. And I'm always, testing too. I'm always asking people, especially people outside of where I live, what are you hearing? What's getting across in the news for you? My niece was visiting, and she lives in Atlanta, Georgia, and she's like, you need to do more on the gas prices. And I'm like, oh yeah, like I have one car in San Francisco, like it just hasn't affected me the same way. So we did that. But to come back to your question, two topics that I've been struggling with. One being gun safety. We actually recently just did a great interview with Shannon Watts from Mothers Demand Action. So that'll be coming up, but I struggled for a while about how to do it, what the right approach was. I mean, at the end of the day, our reality is that there are kids in schools doing active shooter drills. No one wants to hear it, but they're doing that in schools. So I'm always thinking about, like, if you're not really talking about it and your kid comes home and says, hey, Mom, I did an active shooter drill today, like, do you have the language to then have the conversation with them why you do that, what it's for? So that's an area where we will be coming out with an episode. It will be focused more on overall gun safety and what people are doing in the space. So again, taking a very active approach, less about kind of the scary violence, but more just, again, they hear about shootings, they see it on the news. So more from that approach. And then more recently, obviously, with the leak with the Supreme Court for Roe versus Wade, that's something that we have talked about how to address, and made the decision that we're not going to address it now until the case is decided. So once that happens, and we've talked a lot about the importance of the Supreme Court and the role of the Supreme Court, then once that news happens, then we will talk about it. So yes, you can say I'm kicking that can down the road, but being mindful of the age. I mean, we target 8 to 12, and certainly there's a lot of very politically active kids in that age range that go with their parents. So I know a lot of our listeners already know about it, but we're going to approach it when the case actually is decided.
That's interesting because I don't remember being the age of 8 to 12 and there being a single kid that had any interest in anything political. Like maybe a kid was interested in history, but it could be just, I guess, the times we're living in now, where I think people in general are way more interested in politics than they were, a few decades ago.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Oh,
I was just gonna say it's the access to information, access to social media. Everything just moves and is more visible in a way that it wasn't before.
Yeah, and because it's more visible before, then it's a parent's responsibility to get ahead of it and make sure the kids are learning about this stuff in the appropriate way. Like sex. Like nobody wants to have the sex talk with their kid, I doubt. But it's important that you do it so that they learn about this thing correctly, because they're going to hear about it somewhere, right?
I'm just laughing because I got a notification from the school. This is puberty week too, for in my son's class, and I'm not ready.
Oh,
it was a lot. I went through it with my daughter.
Puberty week?
It's called Puberty Week. It was a lot easier with my daughter, I have to be honest. I'm not ready for it with my son.
Oh boy. Well, with that, Tracy, I thank you so much for coming on Upworthy Weekly and sharing about the 10 news. And parents out there that want your kids to get the correct take on the news, tune in and foster a conversation with your kid about what's happening in the world.
Great. Thank you. This is wonderful.